My name is Doug McDonald. I'm the chair of the Rotary District 5360 Protecting Vulnerable People Committee. It's my job today to introduce you to the new policy and procedure for protecting vulnerable people. This document was approved by the district board in September and replaces the 2014 Youth Protection Policy and Procedures. In this presentation, I'm going to cover a few important points, including who's vulnerable, why we need this policy and procedure. We're going to walk through the policies and procedures, and I'm going to explain the next steps in the process to you. First off, who's vulnerable? What does that mean? The 2014 policy spoke about protecting youth and mentioned from time to time vulnerable people, but didn't define them. So we've adopted this definition on the screen of who a vulnerable person is. So it's first and foremost somebody who may be unable to take care of or protect themselves for any reason, from any form of harm, attack, damage, neglect, or exploitation, and is involved in a Rotary program, an activity or event, and to whom Rotary may have a duty of care. So who would that include? Well, it's easy to say it would include, first and foremost, it would include children and youth, because we're continuing the policy to protect them. But it also includes anyone over the age of 18 who may be unable to care for themselves by reason of age or illness or trauma, disability, gender, sexual orientation, language, or any other reason. Why do we need a policy and procedures? First and foremost, it's our job to protect the vulnerable people who participate in our programs. That's simply just living by the four-way test. It's the law in Canada that we must protect them, and it's Rotary international policy. And lastly, it's to protect Rotary, because as we all know, there are examples out there of organizations who haven't done a good job in this area and have found their reputations damaged, and in fact, may not even be able to continue in the service of people. The policy and procedure is one part of our plan, and it fits into the first area, which is getting ready to protect vulnerable people. And it includes policy, the procedures, job descriptions, and other tools that will help us protect vulnerable people. Following that, we're going to be working on advocating for protection, educating people to what their jobs are, and responding when things happen. What does the policy say? Well, in a nutshell, the policy says that we will protect vulnerable people from harm. We'll make Rotary a safe place. We'll ensure that everyone understands their rights and how to protect themselves. That's part of our training commitment. We commit ourselves to screening, training, and supporting our volunteers, and reporting every suspicion that somebody may be being abused, harassed, bullied, exploited, neglected, or discriminated against. The first procedure is volunteer screening. And we're clarifying that everyone that has direct and unsupervised contact with vulnerable people in Rotary programs must be screened before they work with those people. This is Rotary International policy. And screening includes 5 steps: completing an application, being interviewed to make sure you're suitable for the role, having your references checked, providing a vulnerable sector check, criminal record check, and taking training to understand your responsibilities for protecting vulnerable people and being aware of how they may be hurt. The next step, the next procedure is volunteer training. We're going to continue to follow Rotary International training standards. We're going to continue doing role-specific training, and we're going to expand it. We've been doing most of this in Youth Exchange, but we recognize that for Interact, for Early Act, for many of our other programs working with seniors, we need to be helping clubs provide role-specific training for people on their responsibilities for protecting vulnerable people. And it's our job as a district to maintain a system to record and monitor everyone's participation in this training. An important point here is that training is ongoing. It's our district policy that, like first aid training, we ask people to renew this training, because like first aid training, you may not use it every day. You may not use it that often. So every 3 years, we ask that people renew their training and are up to date on how to protect vulnerable people. We've separated out a section on bullying and harassment, particularly not dealing with sexual harassment, but dealing with other forms of harassment, discrimination, and bullying. And we've basically developed a procedure that says we want to focus first on prevention. If we all live by the 4-way test, this becomes easy. But when it happens, every Rotarian and every Rotary volunteer involved in the program with vulnerable people needs to take steps to stop the behavior. When somebody is harassing somebody else or bullying somebody else, we all have a responsibility to say, stop that. And I know that's not easy, but it's something we have to learn to do. The procedure says we then report it either to our club president in a club activity or our district chair when we're involved in a district activity. And that person's going to turn to our district team of subject matter experts who will be ready to help work with the victim and perpetrator to resolve bullying, harassment, and discrimination issues. Recognizing that there are some cases of harassment and discrimination that are criminal and will have to be reported to authorities. Which leads to the next procedure, which is the reporting procedure. And this hasn't changed much since 2014. The points, the 7 points here are really critical. And from experience, I can tell you that when somebody reports, whether it's a current or a past case of abuse or bullying or discrimination or harassment, neglect, the hardest part may be to remain calm, to make sure the person is safe, to assure them that we're ready to help, that we have, making sure they understand we must report the situation. They're not telling us this in confidence. When they tell you this, we're required by law to report. That our job now is to listen, not to interview. Our job is simply to hear what they have to say and then record our notes and then report to authorities and to Rotary. Rotary will take it and the authorities will take it from there. The authorities will do their investigation as their systems require. And Rotary, once that's done, will review the situation to see what we can learn to help prevent these things from happening in Rotary again. The next section is a section that we've blocked out on the Rotary Youth Exchange Program. There are certain policies and procedures that we need to have in place to be certified by Rotary International to have a youth exchange program. That includes club certification, student selection, and parent commitments. It's a brief overview of the sections of the policy and procedures. I'd really encourage you to take the time as a club board or as a district committee to read the documents, go through them carefully, make sure you understand what we're all being asked to do. And then what we're going to do in the next steps is, first, we're going to help clubs adopt this as your policy and procedures, club by club. Any club who's involved in youth exchange must have a protection policy and procedures. And by adopting the district policy, you've met that certification requirement. We're going to help every club and district appoint somebody as your protection officer. We used to call them youth protection officers, but we're just going to call them protection officers going forward. These are the people who are really responsible for managing volunteer screening, ensuring that we're following all of the Rotary International rules around travel and around supervision, and helping people do risk assessments of activities. In smaller clubs, this is going to be something that's perhaps part of the secretary's job, or maybe the sergeant at arms would take this on. Bigger clubs will need somebody to take this job on separately, and we're wanting to work with every district committee so that there's somebody on each of their teams that are ready to do this job. We're having a look at our volunteer management system. We've been using the Youth Exchange Administrative Hub for over 5 years now. And the people who created that working with some Rotary districts on the west coast of Canada and the US, excuse me, are currently developing a new system which will seamlessly transfer data about volunteers and will be, as many of you will know, the questions and the references and so on are pretty youth exchange focused. This will let us use YAY to support the youth exchange program, and this new volunteer management system will let us manage all of the other volunteers, whether they're Rotarians or non-Rotarians in the district. We're having a look at our education system again. It's been 5 years since we've looked at it. There are some Canadian options on helping volunteers deal with bullying and abuse and harassment and discrimination that also talk about mental health. And we want to have a look at some of those and see what the best option going forward for us may be. And lastly, we're updating the response teams so that we're able to have people who, when you do have need for somebody to help you with bullying and harassment, that we have people who are qualified and trained to help you. They could be Rotarians, they could be community volunteers we're turning to for help. At the same time, we're looking at how we respond when an incident does happen, how as after the authorities have dealt with it, that we can learn from the situation. This isn't the blame game, this is helping us learn and prevent things from going wrong in the future. That's a lot of information in a short period of time. Hope each club takes the time to read the document and gets ready to adopt it. We're really hoping that every club will be able to adopt the policy and procedure by the end of November. If you have any questions in the meantime, please send an email to me. My email is on the screen. And one of the committee members will be happy to respond to your questions and even, if necessary, come to your club board meeting and talk with you about it. Thank you very much for your time today.